So, in terms of the benefits, Andrew, of this particular sector, well, one of them is there, what we've kind of half touched on really, is that long-term security of you've got someone in there who's paying a set, monthly amount for a good period of time.
Very much so, as you mentioned, either 12 months or 6 months. So you've got that fixed income, just figures 500, 800, 1,200 pounds per month coming in. You also know your outgoing. So if it's an apartment, you know the service charge, you know the ground rent possibly, you know the letting fee, you know what your mortgage might be. So you can budget very closely for that. I think also on that side of it, the longer the tenant is in there, they tend to then look at it as their own, don't they? They treat it a bit better. They ask, can we decorate it? Can we do this? Because it becomes more of their home than a short-term transient type of tenancy. Yeah,
that's it. And like you said, and budgeting for it and knowing what your outgoings to be, what your income's going to be, I think is so important to a lot of people as well on there. I think one of the other big benefits is more so the UK rental market as a whole. We're very fortunate really that there's pretty much nowhere that won't rent out, on a long-term basis.
A sweeping generalisation. I think anywhere will rent. Regardless of where it is in the country, it's just a question of what rent it would achieve. But if, again, a generalisation, the lower the rent, generally the lower the purchase price. So the two can go hand in hand. That you buy in a poorer area, you're paying less for it, but the rent is still there. So as a percentage term, it may still work. The areas where we struggle on that is the city centres, the bright lights. So you're buying Liverpool, Manchester, Birmingham, London to a degree, where the higher purchase price actually translates into a lower return.
It's hard to get a good yield, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
On that basis with it. But you're right, and then rents increase year on year. There's no signs of that slowing down, and it's a good market really, particularly the investment side, because if people there is a little bit of a credit crunch and people are struggling to maybe buy their own first home, what that tends to mean is more people in the rental sector, which pushes rents up. If it flips the other way, it means the value of the property tends to go up if people are suddenly buying a lot more. So you sort of benefit either way.
That's right. There was talk at the general election, at the budget, that Labour are going to build 1.5 million over the next 5 years. And people say, oh, hang on, if we get 1.5 million houses coming into the market, is it going to depress the market? Absolutely not. No. They're not going to hit that target. I think it's fairly clear, 9 months in, that they're not going to hit that level. So I think what we will see is that they're not building enough homes. The demand is still there. I think with interest rates the way they are, and yes, we had a cut just the other day, but with higher interest rates, first-time buyers can't achieve that deposit, so they're going to have to rent longer.
And not everybody, we should say, wants to necessarily have their own home. Some people are perfectly happy, renting, and it suits them that way on it. So, even if they do build all these homes, doesn't mean that there's going to be the people there to buy them.
I think we've seen a change in society over maybe 30 years, where traditionally you were born and bred in an area, and you stayed there, you worked there, you married there, and started your own family there. And I think that's where people would buy today, with maybe a more transient nature of employment. So, I could live in, I could live here in Chester, but work in London and commute on, maybe not a daily basis, obviously, but COVID has changed, I think, how people perceive that, and I think that's opened up the rental market significantly.
No, absolutely. And we touched on the cost side of things, and it not being too costly letting a property out on that basis. One of those things is obviously furniture as well, and the fact that actually you can let a property out unfurnished. It a lot of the time suits tenants more. They prefer to put their own stamp in it, bring their own furniture during there with it as well. So your upfront costs that way
slightly lower.
Yes, slightly lower, and it suits a lot of people that way with it as well.
I think there's also statistics out there that say that if you rent unfurnished, your tenant stays longer. Can you imagine the faff of shifting all your furniture every 6 months to a different apartment? It's not going to happen.
And it's their own, I suppose, their own furniture. They don't want to damage as much that way.
That's right. So the tenancy tends to be longer.
And one of the other big benefits as well of this particular sector is because it's been going so long, because it's the most traditional form of investing, there is a lot of contacts out there. So when I say contacts, we're talking about management companies. Most estate agencies that have property management side of the business will be able to manage a property on an AST. They're so used to it as well. So you've got a lot of competition there that you can go around and get the best possible price for. Equally on the mortgages front, again, there's a lot of lenders that will lend in that particular market space. So you've got more competition that way. I know interest rates has been hugely topical these last couple of years with it, but people forget ultimately lenders want you to lend, and they will compete with other lenders to bring those rates down.
And we are seeing that. They are starting to ease a bit,
Yeah.
which is improving the marketplace.
Yeah.